The automatic doors of Ridgeview Medical Center slid open, but the wind that hit Alina Ruiz was nothing like the quiet lobby she had seen in movies or during her brief civilian stints. This was a storm. Her hair whipped across her face. Scrubs clung to her like they'd been soaked in sweat and blood. Her boots clanged against the tile floor, echoing through the near-empty hospital lobby. People turned, startled. Some fumbled with their phones, ready to call security. Alina didn't stop. She was moving too fast for hesitation, too fast for anyone to question her. In her hands was a medical bag ripped along one seam, and a pair of bloody gloves peeked out from the pocket. Her breathing came fast, shallow, measured, controlled chaos. She was a soldier in another world, a war zone of chaos, suddenly dropped into suburban calm. Behind the reception desk, Dr. Stephen Marlowe, the chief of emergency medicine, looked up. He was a man used to control, to order, to knowing what was coming next. Alina Ruiz was none of that. She radiated urgency. Fearless, unannounced, and dangerous in a way Marlowe didn't like. His eyes narrowed. I need a trauma bay. Now, Alina shouted, her voice cutting like a whip. Every head in the lobby turned, eyes wide, eyebrows raised. A woman in the waiting area gasped. A janitor paused mid-sweep. Marlowe's hand hovered over the intercom button. "Excuse me, ma'am. You can't just barge in here, security." "I don't have time," Alina barked, cutting him off, stepping closer. She planted her hands on her knees for a moment to steady herself. Her eyes were wide, almost feral, scanning for the tiniest signs of hesitation. 10 minutes, maybe less. If the patient isn't ready when we land, he dies. And I'm not talking about a vague risk. He will die. Marlowe's eyes flicked down to the bag in her hands, the gloves, the dirt-streaked scrubs. "What patient? Who are you?" She straightened, pulling the bag closer, her knuckles white. "His name is Connor Hayes. You will have him in your trauma bay in 10 minutes. That's an order. I don't care about your hospital policies, your committees, your forms. You cannot waste time." Marlowe's hand trembled slightly as he gripped the intercom button. He pressed it anyway. "Security to the lobby, please. We have." Alina's gaze snapped to him. "Call them if you want. But understand this. If your team isn't ready when the patient arrives, you'll be watching him die right in front of you." For a heartbeat, the lobby froze. Nurses froze mid-step. Visitors froze mid-gasp. The fluorescent lights flickered as if echoing the tension in the air. Even the janitor paused, broom in hand. Then a distant metallic whump made everyone flinch. The windows rattled. Marlowe's frown deepened. "Helipad. There's no patient coming via helipad," he said. Alina didn't flinch. She was almost serene now, like the storm outside the doors had followed her in but was entirely under her command. "You will," she said simply. Her words weren't a threat. They weren't bravado. They were facts, and she didn't need to justify them. The intercom crackled to life. "Attention, rooftop inbound, military extraction, ETA 4 minutes. The lobby erupted in whispers. Phones came out. Heads turned skyward as the sound of rotors in the distance grew louder. Patients craned their necks. Nurses began muttering calculations. If the report was accurate, someone critical was coming in, and fast. Marlowe's jaw tightened. He was a man trained to solve crises, but this was beyond the usual bounds. This was not a drill. This was real. And the woman standing before him, messy hair, blood-streaked scrubs, raw urgency, was not a civilian. She had an authority that didn't ask for permission, that didn't wait for approval. Alina didn't move from her stance. Her hands were steady on her bag now. She scanned the lobby again, eyes sharp as a hawk. There was no fear, only focus, and a hint of anger that anyone could even think to question her. "Who is she?" A nurse whispered behind Marlowe, voice trembling. Marlowe didn't answer immediately. He watched Alina, and the truth struck him. This woman was trained, experienced, and most importantly, used to life-and-death decisions made in seconds. He had seen plenty of crises, but nothing like the intensity radiating from her. "You can wait outside," he said finally, voice clipped. Security will escort you." Alina stepped forward. "Or you can prepare Trauma Bay 6, now." Marlowe pressed the intercom again. "Security, please report to the lobby." Alina's eyes locked on him, icy and unflinching. "Every second you waste, you're losing him." Then the distant thrum grew louder. The glass of the lobby windows rattled, the floors vibrated, the lights flickered. Something heavy moved overhead, something coming fast. Marlowe's frown turned into disbelief. "What the—" Alina's eyes didn't leave his. "I told you, you'll have him, just make sure he's ready." A sudden gust of wind whipped through the sliding doors. Everyone in the lobby felt it, a prelude to the massive helicopter descending just outside. The rotors cut through the air like blades. Dust swirled around the lobby. Marlowe blinked, unable to speak. Alina, meanwhile, crouched slightly, ready. Not panicked, not fearful, only ready. She wasn't here to negotiate. She was here to act. The Black Hawk outside was carrying someone she had personally stabilized on the ground, someone whose life rested on the hospital's immediate response. The lobby erupted, phones rang, alarms triggered, patients cried, security scrambled. Marlowe's fingers hovered over the intercom in disbelief. He had no control. None. The woman in front of him didn't need him to act. She had already acted. Alina took a deep breath, centering herself in the chaos. Her eyes flicked toward the elevator that led to the rooftop. Trauma Bay 6 wasn't far. The rotors outside grew louder, vibrating through the floor tiles. The first shadow of the helicopter fell across the lobby. Dust and papers swirled. The crowd gasped collectively. And Alina, holding her torn bag like a lifeline, whispered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. "Hang on, Connor, just hang on." Every head in the lobby turned toward her. For a moment, no one moved. And then, slowly, the realization hit them. She wasn't bluffing. She wasn't acting. She was telling the truth. Marlowe swallowed hard. Security guards hesitated. Nurses froze mid-step. Everyone stared at Alina, trying to read what she had seen, what she knew, what she could do. And then, the first shadow of the Black Hawk's rotor blades sliced across the hospital roof. The building vibrated like it might lift off the ground. Marlowe's voice was barely audible. Who is she?" Alina didn't answer. She was already moving toward the elevators, toward the roof, toward the chaos that only she could control. The lobby erupted into a mix of panic and awe. And for the first time that day, Marlowe realized something terrifyingly simple. This woman was not someone you wanted to stand in the way of. Not today. Not ever. The doors of the elevator slid open. Alina stepped inside. Her eyes never left the rooftop. The rotors roared louder. The hospital shook. And Marlowe, like everyone else, watched, helpless, as the woman who no one had taken seriously moments ago became the single most important person in the building. And the Black Hawk landed. 3 hours before she had stormed the hospital lobby, Alina Ruiz sat in the driver's seat of her beat-up SUV outside a small rural hardware store in the middle of nowhere. The sky was bruised purple with sunset, clouds streaked like smudged charcoal, and a biting wind rattled the windshield. She was alone, or at least she thought she was. Her hands rested on the steering wheel, knuckles white, the weight of memories pressing down. She was supposed to be done. Done with adrenaline, done with chaos, done with being the woman everyone called a hero but never really understood. She stared at the dusty horizon, letting herself breathe. For a few minutes, the world was quiet. Then the phone buzzed. She froze. The number was unfamiliar, but the tone, the low, urgent military frequency, made her stomach sink. "Ruiz," a voice whispered, shaky and thin. Alina's chest tightened. "Yes, who is this?" "It's Connor," the voice said, barely audible over static. You have to come, he's hit, bad, we can't, he won't make it." Connor Hayes. Her mind snapped back to memories she had tried to bury. The burning Humvee, the dust cloud, the sound of screams. Connor, the man who had pulled her from the wreckage without hesitation, who had saved her life when no one else could. Alina's hands gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles cracked. She didn't hesitate. She had no plan, no permission, just instinct and urgency. She started the engine, tires crunching gravel, and drove toward the coordinates Connor's voice had given her. When she arrived at the remote clearing, the scene was chaos. Soldiers crouched over a figure on the ground, blood seeping through torn uniforms. A stretcher lay nearby. Connor's face was pale, eyes barely open, lips pressed together in pain. His breathing was shallow, rattling, almost imperceptible. "He can't survive a normal transport," one crew chief said, his voice low, urgent. "We called every nearby hospital. No one can take him, he's too critical." Alina didn't even hesitate. She slid out of her SUV, mud splattering her boots, and knelt beside him. "I'll stabilize him," she said. "Just keep him on the stretcher." Her hands moved with surgical precision. She tore open a med kit, applied tourniquets, and assessed wounds as if she were still in Kandahar or Fallujah. Her touch was firm, confident, every movement purposeful. Connor groaned softly, his hand twitched in hers. "Alina." "SHH, you're going to be fine," she whispered, pressing her fingers against the bleeding wound on his side. "I've got you." Time didn't exist. Seconds stretched like hours. She could feel the pulse under her fingertips, faint and fatting. She knew every beat mattered. Every adjustment, every decision could tip the scales between life and death. The soldiers backed away. They had seen her work before in other operations. They trusted her instinctively, but there was still fear in their eyes, fear of losing someone they cared about, fear of the unknown. The first rotor wash kicked up dust and debris, signaling the arrival of the Black Hawk that would carry them to Ridgeview. Alina looked up. The chopper wasn't for transport. It was extraction, emergency evacuation, and it was the only chance Connor had. "Get him on the stretcher now," she shouted. "No hesitation." They lifted him gently as she applied the final stabilization measures. Oxygen mask adjusted, airway clear, pressure on the thoracic wound. Her gloves were slick with blood, sweat dripping down her forehead. Every breath was calculated, controlled, precise. The helicopter touched down, kicking up a whirlwind of dirt and loose gravel. The crew shouted over the rotor's roar. Alina kept her hands on Connor's chest, ensuring that he stayed alive as they lifted him onto the stretcher. "Ready," one of the medics yelled. Alina nodded. "Let's go." As the Black Hawk lifted, the world became a blur. Wind tore at her hair, dirt and debris assaulted her face, and the roar of the blades threatened to drown out every sound except the thudding of Connor's pulse beneath her fingers. The flight was tense. Every bump, every jolt, every sway of the helicopter made her heart skip a beat. She monitored his vitals, adjusting oxygen, reapplying pressure, speaking to him softly. "Stay with me," she murmured, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "You've saved me once. Let me save you now. You're going to be okay." Connor's hand twitched slightly. His lips moved, trying to form words. Alina leaned closer, straining to hear. "Hang on," he gasped. "I'm not letting go," she said, voice firm. "Not now, not ever." The skyline came into view. Ridgeview Medical Center, its rooftop bathed in the dying light of evening. It looked calm from above, peaceful, almost serene, but she knew better. The lobby, the staff, the chaos that awaited, they had no idea what was coming, and she had only minutes to prepare them. Her mind raced through contingencies. Every trauma scenario she had ever faced flashed before her, the ones she survived, the ones she didn't. She planned routes, anticipated questions, visualized the operating room, trauma bays, surgical teams. Every detail mattered. 4 minutes to the rooftop. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. Alina tightened her grip on the stretcher handles, leaning close to Connor. "Just a little longer," she whispered. "Just a little longer. You can make it." She caught a reflection of herself in the helicopter's window. Sweat-streaked, dirt-streaked, eyes burning with urgency. She looked like chaos personified. She looked like someone no civilian should be trusted to save a life, but here she was. The city came into view. Ridgeview Medical Center loomed ahead, tiny, almost fragile against the storm of rotors and wind. And then the rooftop appeared empty, except for the faint glimmer of lights and the distant shadows of staff beginning to notice the approaching aircraft. Alina's heart hammered. She had stabilized him, she had kept him alive against every odds, but the hospital, civilian hospital, was not prepared for this. Protocols would slow them down. Security would question her. Doctors would hesitate. And she didn't have time. The rotor wash kicked up dust and debris across the roof. She barked instructions, guiding the crew. Lifting him now, steady, steady. Connor's pulse was weak, but it was there. Weak, flickering, but alive. "Hang on, buddy," she whispered. "You're going to the right place now. They'll finish what I started." The Black Hawk touched down with a jolt. Dust whipped into the air like a sandstorm. The crew lifted Connor carefully. Alina followed, bag in hand, ready to sprint if necessary. She reached the hospital doors and hesitated only a moment, inhaling sharply, gathering every shred of composure she had left. Inside, the lobby was silent but tense, the lights flickering from the rotor's storm outside. Faces turned toward her. Security guards shifted uneasily. Doctors froze mid-step. And then Alina, bloodied, bruised, determined, looked up at the ceiling where the helicopter's rotors had left shadows dancing across the tiles. She whispered to herself, a vow almost too quiet for anyone to hear. "You survive this. You survive, I won't fail you." And with that, she charged forward into the lobby, into the chaos of disbelief and fear, into the trauma bay that held the only chance for Connor Hayes, and possibly the only chance to save him before it was too late. The battle had only just begun. Alina Ruiz stormed through the sliding doors of Ridgeview Medical Center with the kind of urgency that made people step back instinctively. The lobby smelled of antiseptic and fear, a faint metallic tang lingering in the air. The rotors of the Black Hawk still shook the building, and dust from the rooftop filtered through the ventilation shafts. At the front desk, Dr. Stephen Marlowe, chief of emergency medicine, looked like he'd seen a ghost. Alina's voice cut across the lobby again, sharp, commanding, impossible to ignore. "I need a trauma bay. Now Bay 6 trauma team ready." Marlowe's hand trembled slightly as he pressed the intercom, but his voice carried authority. "Security, step in here immediately." Alina didn't flinch. She planted herself like a wall between him and the doors. "If you delay, he dies. You hear me? He dies." Marlowe's jaw tightened. He was trained for emergencies, yes. He'd overseen hundreds of cases. He'd managed crises, disasters, even multi-vehicle pileups. But this was something different. A civilian woman, bloodied, ragged, ordering him around like she owned the hospital, claiming a Black Hawk was bringing a patient who might not survive 5 more minutes. "Who exactly are you?" he demanded. "And how do you know my patients' names? How do you know anything about our procedures?" "Alina Ruiz," she said, calm but deadly serious. "Former combat medic, freelance responder. You don't have time to ask questions. You have time to prepare. Trauma Bay 6. Now." "Freelance?" Marlowe scoffed. This is a hospital. You can't just." Then the building trembled. The windows rattled violently, papers flew off desks, and the fluorescent lights flickered like warning sirens. The faint hum of the Black Hawk grew louder, closer. Marlowe's disbelief hardened into panic. The helicopter, how what? "You'll see," Alina said, already moving toward the elevators. "Or you won't, depends on you." Before he could respond, the hospital's intercom crackled. "Attention, rooftop inbound. Military extraction, trauma severity red triple, ETA 2 minutes." Marlowe froze, his knuckles turning white on the intercom. Red triple. That wasn't a code he heard often. That was catastrophic, life-threatening, unstable. "Security," he shouted, snapping his gaze to the two guards stationed near the lobby. "Escort her." Alina didn't wait. She darted toward the elevators, her boots clanging against the tile. The guards followed, hesitant, because even they felt the electric tension in the air. She moved with the confidence of someone who had faced death countless times and survived. Every motion screamed authority, urgency, and precision. As she hit the elevator button, her mind raced. Connor Hayes, her responsibility, her obligation, was minutes away from entering this hospital. If the trauma bay wasn't ready, if the staff hesitated, if protocols slowed down action, he would die. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside, bag in hand, eyes flicking to the floor indicator, counting down the floors as she rose toward the roof. Behind her, Marlowe watched, torn between disbelief and a creeping realization. She knew what she was doing. He had seen decisive action before, yes, but never like this. This was instinct honed in life-and-death environments. He swallowed hard. He should stop her, intercept her, arrest her for breaking protocol. But a voice in his head whispered, "You won't make it in time." She's right. By the time the elevator reached the roof, the Black Hawk was circling overhead, rotor wash turning the edges of the rooftop into a whirlwind of dust and debris. Alina sprinted the last few meters, ignoring the sting of grit in her eyes and the wind tearing at her hair. Two medics were waiting, straining under the weight of Connor's stretcher. Blood had seeped through the makeshift dressings, pooling onto the tarp covering the deck. His eyes fluttered weakly, consciousness wavering. "Alina," one medic gasped. "He's barely hanging on, you sure you can?" "I've got this," she cut him off, kneeling beside Connor. Her hands worked over his wounds, reassessing, adjusting, controlling bleeding with precise pressure. Every motion was deliberate, refined by years in combat zones, years of facing death in hostile environments. The medic watched, awed and terrified. This was no ordinary civilian. This woman had saved countless lives before, and now she was saving his friend. "Airway clear," she barked. "Clear," the medic responded, voice trembling. "Good, oxygen at max. Chest tube insertion prepped. Let's go, he's not surviving if we stall another second." Marlowe arrived at the edge of the rooftop, out of breath, his medical coat flapping in the wind. He looked at the scene. Blood, dust, chaos, and one woman controlling it all with a calm intensity that made him question his own authority. What's happening?" he asked, half in awe, half in disbelief. "This is happening," Alina said simply, nodding toward Connor. "He's alive barely. You're lucky I showed up." Marlowe swallowed hard. "You can't just—" She looked at him, icy and unyielding. "Try to stop me, and you'll be watching him die while you argue." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The helicopter blades thudded overhead, a drumbeat of urgency and impending danger. Then a loud crack reverberated across the roof. The rotors kicked up a sheet of debris, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. Connor groaned weakly, nearly slipping from the stretcher. Alina's hands shot out, steadying him immediately. "Focus," she shouted. "Eyes on the patient, team, you're losing him fast." Marlowe moved closer, finally realizing the gravity of the situation. The hospital's protocol manuals and red tape meant nothing here. This wasn't a scheduled surgery. This was survival. As the Black Hawk landed with a shudder, the rotor wash almost knocking the stretcher over, Alina barked instructions. "Lift him carefully. Watch the airway, pressure constant." She glanced at Marlowe, who was finally moving with purpose. His face was pale, but he was no longer questioning her. He was assisting, following her lead. The chopper ramp lowered. Outside, the wind tore at the edges of the tarp covering Connor. Alina grabbed the stretcher handles with both hands, guiding it down the ramp as the medics steadied themselves against the shaking deck. Minutes stretched, seconds became eternal, every movement counted, every misstep could cost a life. Finally, they reached the rooftop access doors. Alina shoved the doors open and charged inside, her boots pounding the concrete stairs. Marlowe followed, breathless. Security trailed hesitantly, unsure whether to arrest her or assist. Inside, the hospital corridors seemed impossibly long, filled with echoes of rotor wash from above. Nurses and doctors peeked out of rooms, eyes wide at the sight. A woman running through the hospital with a stretcher, shouting orders, radiating authority and control. "Trauma Bay 6, clear the hallway now," Alina shouted. Staff scrambled, machines beeped, alarms blared, patients watched, terrified and fascinated. The chaos was tangible, almost electric. As she reached the trauma bay, Alina dropped to one knee, checking Connor's vitals again. His pulse was faint. Oxygen levels dangerously low. Internal bleeding uncontrolled despite her initial measures. Marlowe finally spoke, voice tight. "His injuries, they're severe. I've never seen." "I know," she interrupted, adjusting his oxygen mask. "That's why we're not wasting another second. Get him on the table, now." The trauma team moved with urgency. Alina directed each action: chest tube placement, IV insertion, airway stabilization. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. Every motion was precise, commanding, flawless. Marlowe watched, stunned, his authority rendered useless by the reality of her experience. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't training. This was instinct honed through fire and blood. Connor groaned softly, blinking weakly. Alina's gloved hand brushed sweat from his brow. "Almost there. You've got this, Connor, just hold on." The trauma bay, once calm, had transformed into a war zone of medical urgency. Alarms, shouts, and the hum of the helicopter above blended into a symphony of survival. And in the eye of the storm, Alina Ruiz remained the calm, commanding center, the unyielding force between life and death. For Marlowe, for the staff, for everyone witnessing it, one realization hit hard. This woman was not just extraordinary, she was indispensable. 2 floors below the rooftop trauma bay, a quiet tension gripped the hospital hallway. The hum of fluorescent lights mixed with distant rotor vibrations from the rooftop. In this subdued chaos, Lydia Hayes moved like a shadow, her navy suit crisp, her heels clicking against the tile with precision. Every step was deliberate, almost cautious, but there was an urgency in her movements that no one could mistake. Lydia gripped her phone tightly, fingers pressing so hard the screen threatened to crack. She had monitored every military alert tied to her estranged brother, Connor, since he joined the Air Rescue Division. She hadn't spoken to him in years, not since the incident that fractured their family, leaving unspoken resentment and guilt in its wake. But this alert, the one announcing a trauma extraction at Ridgeview, sent a spike of adrenaline through her veins. "He can't be here," she whispered to herself, voice barely audible over the distant thrum of the Black Hawk overhead. "Not now, not with what I found." From the inside pocket of her blazer, she withdrew a folded document. Its edges were crisp, almost glowing under the harsh fluorescent light. She'd flown across the country to deliver this personally, the culmination of months of investigation, weeks of sleepless nights, and the weight of a truth no one else could touch. It was a transfer order, reassignment, and scrawled at the bottom in their father's handwriting an urgent note. "Tell him the truth before they do." Lydia's pulse quickened as she read the words again. Connor was being sent on a mission he wasn't supposed to be on, and now he was wounded, injured in a way that could have ended everything. Someone wanted this buried. Someone wanted him silenced. She moved quickly toward the elevators, clutching the document like a lifeline. But a figure emerged from behind a column, a man in a gray jacket. His presence was subtle, but there was something in the way he moved, controlled and deliberate, that set off alarms in her mind. He shadowed her steps, silent, almost invisible, yet undeniably close. Every instinct she had screamed that he wasn't just following her, he was hunting her. Meanwhile, on the rooftop, Alina Ruiz had secured Connor onto the hospital stretcher and was moving with brisk, methodical efficiency. Every second mattered. She had stabilized him as much as she could in the field, but he was still teetering on the edge. His breathing was shallow, his eyes half-lidded, lips cracked and pale. "Check vitals," Alina barked. Her hands moved with precision, inserting an IV, adjusting oxygen flow, maintaining pressure on the chest wound. Every instruction was short, direct, like commands given in combat zones, precise and unyielding. "BP dropping," one of the medics shouted. "Again," Alina snapped, eyes scanning the monitors. She slammed her hand over the IV pump, recalibrating, muttering under her breath. "Not today, not now, not him." Connor's eyes flickered, and for a fleeting second recognition and relief passed across his face. "Alina," he whispered. "I'm here," she said softly, brushing a damp strand of hair from his forehead. "I've got you." But even as she worked, Alina's senses were sharp. Something in the air told her the danger wasn't over. The hospital was calm compared to the storm outside, but instincts honed over years of battlefield experience told her that calm was deceptive. Something was coming. Something else. Back in the hallway, Lydia quickened her pace, the gray-jacketed figure only a step behind. She tried to blend in, to make herself invisible among the hospital staff and wandering patients, but the sound of heels clicking echoed louder than she wanted. "Security," she shouted suddenly. "I need protection, he's following me." Two guards rushed to intercept, but the man in the gray jacket moved with inhuman precision. He slipped a hand into his jacket like a predator, and the guard's heart skipped a beat. "Gun," one of them shouted. The hallway erupted into chaos. Patients screamed, doctors and nurses ducked behind counters. The gray-jacketed man moved faster than anyone could react, knocking one guard into a supply cart, flipping another with a fluid motion, and advancing relentlessly toward Lydia. Lydia bolted. She darted around corners, clutching the folder to her chest. Every step was measured but desperate. She had to get this document to Connor. It was the only thing that could keep him alive, not just physically but politically, legally, and morally. Alina's ears caught the commotion from the trauma bay. She exchanged a quick glance with Marlowe, who had been observing the rooftop extraction with growing disbelief. "He's not after her," Alina said quietly, almost to herself. "He's after Connor." Marlowe's eyes widened. "Why?" "I don't know," Alina admitted, but her instincts screamed it was true. Connor wasn't just a patient, he was a witness, a liability, and whatever he'd seen on his mission, it was worth killing for. Upstairs, the Black Hawk rotor wash kicked up dust across the rooftop again, rattling equipment and monitors. Alina adjusted Connor on the stretcher, making sure his airway remained clear, his chest stabilized. "Just a little longer," she murmured. "Hold on, Connor. We're almost there." Lydia rounded a corner and almost collided with Alina as she charged down the hallway. "You need to protect him," Lydia gasped, handing over the folder. "They don't want him alive." Alina grabbed the folder with one gloved hand, her eyes scanning Lydia's. "Stay close," she said. "I'll get him through this, but we move now." The gray-jacketed man appeared at the end of the hall, eyes cold, focused, calculated. Every step he took was deliberate, predatory. Alina tightened her grip on the trauma shears she had kept from the field, her last line of defense if it came to that. "You picked the wrong hospital," she said, voice low, steady, but carrying the weight of a challenge. The man didn't respond. He simply advanced. Connor groaned faintly from the stretcher. His eyes flickered open, recognition passing over his face for a split second. He tried to reach toward Alina, but his injuries were too severe. "We're not losing him," Alina whispered under her breath. Her fingers tightened on the shears, every nerve in her body coiled like a spring. The hospital hallway seemed to stretch infinitely. Patients and staff had retreated to the sides, watching the unfolding drama in disbelief. Security had surrounded the hallway, but the attackers' skill made their presence almost irrelevant. And then, without warning, the building shook. Another Black Hawk appeared outside, hovering ominously over the hospital, its silhouette dark against the fading evening sky. The rotors created a storm of wind and debris, rattling the doors and windows. The gray-jacketed man paused for just a fraction of a second, calculating. And that fraction was all Alina needed. She charged, dragging the stretcher with Connor toward the trauma bay, Lydia at her side. The unfolding chaos was a blur. Alarms, shouting, the pounding of boots against tile, the roar of helicopter blades, Connor's shallow breathing and Alina's sharp, commanding orders. They reached the trauma bay, and Alina dropped to her knees beside Connor, quickly assessing his condition. His vitals were fragile, his body battered, and the room around them was a war zone of sound and motion. Marlowe and the trauma team moved into position, and for the first time, Alina allowed herself a moment to acknowledge the complexity of what they were dealing with. Connor wasn't just injured. He carried secrets that could destroy lives. He was a liability to dangerous people, and now those people were in the hospital hunting for him. "Stay with me," Alina whispered to Connor. "I won't let them touch you." The attacker in the hallway hesitated, calculating the next move. But Alina's eyes never left Connor, her hands steady, unyielding. She had fought battles in deserts, jungles, and war zones. This was no different, except the stakes were higher, the terrain unpredictable, and the enemy more cunning than most she had faced. And in that tense, electric moment, everyone in the hospital hallway realized one chilling truth. Connor Hayes' survival depended entirely on the woman who no one took seriously just hours ago. The trauma bay was a controlled chaos of flashing monitors, beeping alarms, and shouted orders. Alina Ruiz hovered over Connor Hayes, her gloved hands moving with precise, practiced motions. The trauma team responded instantly to her commands, but there was an edge of panic in their eyes. They were trained, yes, but never like this. Never under the pressure of a patient so critically unstable and a threat so immediate. "BP's dropping again," shouted a nurse, her voice tight. "I've got it," Alina barked, inserting a central line with unwavering precision. Sweat ran down her temple, mingling with dust and blood. Her heart pounded, but she didn't falter. Every movement was a calculated measure to keep him alive. Connor's face was pale, lips cracked, eyes flickering in and out of awareness. His hand twitched weakly toward Alina. "Don't let them," he murmured. "They're not touching you," Alina said, her voice low, firm, and unbreakable. "Not while I'm here. You hear me? Not a single step further." Outside the trauma bay, Lydia Hayes guarded the hallway entrance, the folder of secrets clutched to her chest. The gray-jacketed attacker had vanished from sight, but that didn't mean he was gone. Every muscle in Lydia's body tensed, ready for the inevitable. She knew he wouldn't give up. He wouldn't allow Connor to survive. Alina's eyes flicked to the monitors. Heart rate unstable. Internal bleeding uncontrolled. Oxygen saturation dropping. She adjusted the ventilator settings, stabilizing the airway, and directed a nurse to administer a blood transfusion immediately. "Prep for thoracotomy," Alina commanded, her voice sharp and unyielding. The room fell silent for a fraction of a second before the team moved with synchronized precision. Marlowe hovered nearby, watching in stunned disbelief. "I've never seen," he began. "Alina doesn't have time for explanations," Lydia said sharply, standing at the doorway. "Just follow her lead." Alina didn't answer. She was fully immersed in Connor's survival. Each second stretched into a lifetime. She guided the team's hands as they made incisions, controlled hemorrhaging, and stabilized major vessels. Every movement required absolute focus. Every command was a lifeline. Connor groaned faintly, trying to speak again. "Alina can't keep me." "SHH, don't talk," she said softly, brushing his damp hair from his forehead. "Just breathe. You're stronger than this. You can survive this." As the procedure continued, alarms from the hospital's security system flared. The gray-jacketed man had returned, moving stealthily through service corridors, his eyes scanning for an opportunity. He wasn't just after Connor. He was here to disrupt, to intimidate, to complete whatever mission had brought him to this hospital. Alina felt it. Her instincts screamed that danger was close, but she didn't allow herself to turn. Not yet. Connor's life depended on her hands, her focus, and her command. A sudden crash echoed from the hallway. Lydia spun toward the sound, eyes widening. The man had struck a security guard, knocking him unconscious, and continued forward with ruthless efficiency. "He's coming," Lydia whispered into her comms, voice trembling. "Alina, he's in the hospital." Alina's jaw tightened. She didn't stop her hands on Connor, but she gave precise, calm instructions. "Keep the thoracotomy open. Monitor vitals. Prepare for rapid intervention if BP drops further. I need full focus on him, team. Not a word about anything else until I give it." Connor's heart rate faltered. The monitors shrieked. Alina's hands flew over his chest, applying pressure, massaging the cardiac tissue manually. "Come on, Connor, fight, you're not done." Marlowe, who had finally absorbed the gravity of the situation, moved closer, assisting without hesitation. He held instruments, handed off suction, stabilized tools, whatever Alina commanded. For the first time, he realized that protocol and hierarchy didn't matter. Only survival did. The room trembled. The distant whir of rotors from the rooftop Black Hawk mixed with the chaos of alarms and shouting. Connor's life balanced on a razor's edge. One misstep, 1 second too long, and it would all be over. Suddenly, the gray-jacketed man burst into the trauma bay. Security guards flanked him, trying to intercept, but he moved with impossible speed and precision. He made a grab toward the folder Lydia still held, eyes cold and calculating. "Stay back," Lydia shouted, shoving him with all her strength. Alina's eyes snapped to the threat. Without hesitation, she reached for the nearest instrument, a surgical clamp, and swung it like a baton. The attacker stumbled back, surprised, but recovered instantly. "Focus on the patient," Alina barked, voice rising over the chaos. "Do not let him distract you." Connor's eyes flickered, recognizing the danger even in his weakened state. A low groan escaped his lips, but Alina didn't falter. She adjusted the clamp, controlled the bleeding, and applied a final compression to the arterial wound. "BP stabilizing," a nurse announced, voice tight but relieved. Alina allowed herself a fraction of a breath, but her eyes never left the attacker. He had retreated slightly, reassessing, calculating his next move. "Who sent you?" she demanded, voice low and deadly. "What do you want?" The man didn't answer. He only smiled, thin-lipped and cold, before retreating into the shadows of the hallway, vanishing as quickly as he appeared. Alina didn't relax. Her hands continued their work, adjusting Connor's oxygen, monitoring his vitals and stabilizing his chest. She knew the danger wasn't gone, it was merely postponed. Someone wanted Connor dead and they weren't finished. Lydia finally approached the stretcher, holding the folder tightly. This explains everything," she said breathlessly. "Orders, threats, everything you need to know about why they're after him." Alina glanced at the folder, eyes narrowing. "This changes nothing right now," she said. "Right now we save him, then we deal with the rest." Connor's heart began to steady. His breathing became more even, the monitors less frantic. Every second felt like an eternity. The trauma bay team, guided by Alina, worked with synchronized efficiency, performing procedures that balanced on the knife's edge between life and death. Finally, the monitors beeped a steadier rhythm. Alina allowed herself a fraction of a smile, but it was fleeting. She knew the attacker could return at any moment. She knew Connor's survival was temporary without the truth, and the threats surrounding him were only intensifying. Marlowe, still standing nearby, finally spoke, voice low and awed. "I don't know what you are, Alina, but that was remarkable. He would have died." "He's not out of the woods yet," Alina said, voice firm. She adjusted his oxygen mask, keeping one eye on the monitors and the other on the hallway. And if anyone thinks they can interrupt this again, they'll regret it. Lydia nodded, her eyes wide. We don't have much time. They're organized. They know what they're doing. You saved him physically, but there's more coming. Alina's jaw tightened. Then we prepare. We don't wait for them. We move first. Connor stays alive and we deal with the rest on our terms. No distractions, no hesitation. Understood. Marlowe nodded, understanding at last that hierarchy and protocol meant nothing in the face of someone with Alina's skill and resolve. Everyone else in the trauma bay understood it too. Connor, still unconscious, clung to life by a thread, but for the first time in hours his survival felt possible. Not guaranteed, not easy, but possible. Outside the trauma bay, the hospital was tense with anticipation. Every shadow could hold a threat. Every second could bring new danger. And in the center of it all, Alina Ruiz remained the unwavering force, the guardian between life and death, ready for whatever came next. The trauma bay had quieted slightly, though the tension was far from gone. Connor Hayes lay stabilized on the operating table, his shallow breaths monitored with precision, his chest rising and falling with the fragile rhythm of life. The team moved with careful precision, but Alina Ruiz knew better than anyone that the danger was far from over. The attacker in the gray jacket wasn't just a random threat. He was a professional, calculated and patient. Lydia Hayes hovered near the doorway, clutching the folder that held Connor's secrets. Her hands trembled, though she tried to hide it. "Alina, you need to see this," she whispered. "Everything he's been sent here for, everything thereafter, it's all in this folder. You need to know." Alina glanced at her, eyes sharp. "Not now," she said firmly. "I don't care who they are or what they want. Right now Connor stays alive, that's it. We deal with the rest afterward." But the subtle tension in the air made her uneasy. Her instincts had been honed over years in war zones, and the faintest vibrations, the almost imperceptible shifts in shadows, told her that the danger was already inside the hospital. And she was right. From the hallway outside the trauma bay, a quiet click echoed, a door unlatching silently. Alina's head snapped toward the sound, heart hammering. She grabbed a surgical clamp from the tray beside her, her hands steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. 2 security guards had entered the bay with guns drawn, but even they moved hesitantly. The shadows were deceptive. Something, or someone, was moving faster than human reflexes should allow. Then the man in the gray jacket emerged, calm and terrifyingly focused. His eyes were fixed on Connor, on Alina, on the folder in Lydia's hands. He didn't hesitate. Every step was deliberate, predatory. "Stay back," Alina shouted, positioning herself between him and the operating table. Her voice was steel, unwavering. "You want him, you'll go through me first." The man didn't respond. He only smiled thinly, a flash of cruel amusement in his eyes, and then he lunged. Alina's instincts took over. She ducked slightly, swinging the surgical clamp with precision, forcing him to step back. He was fast, too fast, but she had faced speed and strength like this before. She met his attack with a series of controlled, tactical maneuvers, using her body weight and momentum to counter his advances. Lydia shrank back, clutching the folder, eyes wide with fear. "Alina, be careful," she shouted. Alina didn't respond. Her focus was absolute. Every second Connor remained on the table, every breath he took, depended on her keeping the attacker at bay. The team in the trauma bay tried to continue their work, but the presence of the intruder caused chaos. Instruments clattered to the floor. Monitors beeped wildly. Connor's vitals wavered dangerously. "BP dropping," one nurse yelled. "I've got it," Alina barked, adjusting the pressure on his wound with one hand while holding the clamp in the other. Her body moved in perfect coordination, a blend of medical precision and combative skill honed from years of battlefield experience. The attacker struck again, faster this time, almost too quick to see. Alina sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and twisted, forcing him to stumble. But he recovered instantly, smirking. "You're good," he said, voice low and menacing, "but not enough." Alina's jaw tightened. "You're about to find out exactly how enough looks." She pivoted, sweeping her leg to knock him off balance. He stumbled back against the wall, giving her just enough time to focus entirely on Connor. The monitors beeped steadily now, his vitals stabilizing slightly. But the danger wasn't over. Lydia handed Alina the folder, urgency in her eyes. "You need to see this. Now." Alina took it in one hand while still holding her defensive stance with the other. She scanned the documents quickly, encrypted military orders, classified mission reports, and notes detailing Connor's extraction of highly sensitive intelligence. This wasn't just about a wounded man. This was about secrets someone was willing to kill to protect. "They want this," Alina muttered under her breath, glancing at the intruder. "That's why they came here. It's not him. They're after what he knows." The attacker paused, realizing Alina had possession of the folder. His smile faded, replaced by a look of cold calculation. He adjusted his stance, preparing for another attack. Alina didn't hesitate. She pivoted again, blocking his next strike, using his own momentum to push him back. Her movements were a blur, fluid, precise, lethal if necessary. She wasn't just defending herself. She was defending Connor's life. The trauma team continued working, steady hands moving with practiced efficiency under her direction. Connor's chest was stabilized. Oxygen levels improved. Every second was a delicate balance between life and death. Marlowe, now fully aware of the threat, assisted in securing the area, moving instruments and helping stabilize Connor's position. He had long since stopped questioning Alina's authority. He was now a believer, a witness to the skill and determination that kept a man on the edge of death alive. The intruder lunged again, this time directly for the folder. Alina anticipated the move. She swung, forcing him to retreat, narrowly missing her. "Not a chance," she said, voice low, deadly. "He survives, that's all that matters. You'll get nothing." The man's eyes flicked to Connor, calculating his next move. Then, with a sudden, unexpected motion, he disappeared into the shadows of the hospital hallway, retreating as silently as he had appeared. Alina didn't relax. Her eyes scanned every corner, every doorway. She knew he wasn't gone. He was merely regrouping, planning his next strike. Connor's life hung in the balance, and she couldn't afford a single distraction. Lydia approached, still clutching the folder. "He's going to come back," she whispered, "and next time he might succeed." "I know," Alina said, adjusting Connor's oxygen mask, checking his vitals again. "But he won't, not while I'm here." The room fell into a tense quiet. Connor's vitals stabilized, thanks to Alina's swift interventions, but the danger remained palpable. Every shadow, every whisper of movement could signal the attacker's return. Alina allowed herself a brief glance at Connor's face. Even in unconsciousness, his features were tense, but there was a hint of relief. He was alive. He was surviving. Marlowe stepped closer, voice low and awestruck. How do you do this? How do you keep calm with death hanging over you?" Alina didn't answer immediately. Her eyes never left the hallway. "Focus," she said finally. "Life doesn't wait for anyone to be ready. You fight while you can, you protect while you can, and you don't let go ever." The folder in Lydia's hands trembled slightly. It contained secrets that could topple careers, expose conspiracies, and ignite conflicts. And now they were in Alina's hands, protected, secure for the moment. But the attacker, relentless and determined, would return. Outside the trauma bay, the hospital corridors were eerily quiet, the calm before the storm. Every staff member, every guard, and every bystander knew the tension was far from over. Alina's hands moved with precision, her mind already calculating the next steps. Connor's survival wasn't just about medical intervention. It was about strategy, foresight, and anticipating the moves of a calculated, ruthless enemy. And in that moment, one thing was clear. The battle for Connor Hayes' life was far from over. The trauma bay had become a fortress of controlled chaos. Alina Ruiz stood over Connor Hayes, monitoring his vitals with precision, guiding the team with a mix of urgency and unyielding authority. His chest rose and fell steadily now, a fragile victory in the war against death, but the air was thick with tension. Every shadow, every whisper from the hospital corridors reminded Alina that the enemy was still out there, watching, waiting, calculating the perfect moment to strike. Lydia Hayes clutched the folder of sensitive documents, her eyes darting nervously toward the trauma bay doors. She could feel the weight of what Connor carried. Intelligence so dangerous that it could topple high-ranking officials, expose covert operations, and place multiple lives at risk. "We can't stay in here forever," Lydia whispered to Alina. "He knows we have it. He'll come back stronger, faster." Alina's jaw tightened. "Then we prepare. Connor's life is the priority. That's all that matters. Everything else can wait until he's alive." But preparation was tricky. The gray-jacketed attacker had proven he was no ordinary threat. He moved with stealth, precision, and lethal intent. Alina knew it wasn't a matter of if he would strike again, but when, and she had to be ready. Suddenly, the quiet hum of the hospital was pierced by a distant crash from the floor below. Lights flickered and alarms buzzed in sequence. Alina's instinct screamed, "He's inside. He's coming now." "Alina," Lydia said, her voice tense, "he's here. He's inside the building." Alina's hands tightened on the surgical instruments. "Keep Connor stable. I'll handle the rest." Before anyone could react further, the hospital doors to the trauma bay burst open. The gray-jacketed man stepped inside, his movements smooth, deliberate, a predator entering its prey's territory. His eyes locked on Connor, then on the folder Lydia held. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, voice low, deadly calm. "I'm not leaving," Alina shot back, stepping in front of Connor. "Not while he's alive, not while I'm standing." The attacker's eyes flicked to the monitors, then back at Alina. "You can't stop what's coming. He's not just a patient. He's a liability, and you." Alina didn't let him finish. With a swift motion, she grabbed a nearby steel tray, using it as both shield and distraction. The man lunged, fast, almost impossibly fast, but Alina anticipated his strike, sidestepping and using her body weight to push him back. The trauma team scrambled, but Alina's focus never wavered from Connor. She barked orders in short, precise bursts. "Stabilize airway, adjust oxygen, keep pressure on thoracic wound." Connor groaned faintly, his eyes flickering open. Recognition passed across his face as he tried to speak. "Alina, folder." "I've got it," she said, voice calm despite the storm around them. "Just focus on breathing. You're safe here." The attacker recovered quickly, smirking. "Safe," he mocked. "You think this ends well for you?" Alina's eyes narrowed. She didn't answer verbally. Her movements spoke for her. With every defensive maneuver, she drove the man back, keeping him from reaching Connor or the folder. Each strike, each pivot, each block was calculated, precise. Life or death determined in the blink of an eye. Lydia, still clutching the folder, edged closer to the bay's supply closet. "Alina, maybe I can." "Stay with him," Alina snapped. "Protect the information. That's your job, nothing else." The man lunged again, faster this time, attempting to grab Connor's IV line. Alina blocked, twisting her body to leverage his momentum against him. The two collided with a force that sent a nearby cart tipping over, instruments clattering to the floor. "You don't understand what you're protecting," he hissed, teeth gritted. Alina met his gaze. "I understand perfectly. I'm keeping him alive, and you won't get what you want." Connor's groans grew louder as his vitals wavered under the stress. Alina's eyes flicked to the monitors, blood pressure dropping, oxygen saturation falling, internal bleeding creeping dangerously upward. Every second mattered. She tightened her grip on his chest wound, massaging gently but firmly while still defending against the attacker. "Enough!" she shouted. With a swift motion, she used a combination of martial training and sheer instinct to push the attacker toward the wall, knocking him off balance. He staggered, but his hands shot for a concealed weapon. Alina's eyes narrowed. There was no time for hesitation. She lunged, striking the man's wrist with a steel clamp. The weapon clattered to the floor. The attacker cursed under his breath, realizing his advantage was gone. At that moment, Lydia stepped forward, holding the folder high. "He has the evidence," she shouted. "He's not just a patient. He knows too much. If you go after him, you'll face consequences you can't control." The attacker's eyes flicked to the folder, momentarily distracted. Alina seized the moment, driving forward with a controlled push that sent him sprawling to the floor. She grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back in a tactical restraint. "Not today," she said, voice icy. "Not while he's alive." The man struggled, but Alina held firm. Security guards, finally coordinated, rushed in to secure him. He spat curses but couldn't break free. Alina didn't release him until he was handcuffed and subdued, the danger neutralized for now. With the immediate threat contained, Alina turned her attention fully back to Connor. The monitors beeped steadily now, though he was still critically weak. She adjusted his oxygen, checked IV lines, and gently massaged his chest wound. "Connor, you hear me," she whispered, brushing a damp strand of hair from his forehead. "You're safe now. You're going to make it." Connor's eyes fluttered, a faint smile touching his lips despite his exhaustion. "Alina, you always." Alina's jaw tightened. "Don't speak, just survive, that's all I need." Marlowe, still standing nearby, shook his head in disbelief. "I've never seen anything like this," he murmured. "You just saved his life again." Alina gave him a brief nod, then turned her eyes to Lydia. "What's in that folder?" Lydia swallowed hard, hands trembling. "Orders, secret extraction, sensitive intel. It's everything that could destroy Connor if it got into the wrong hands. And now we know who's after it. They're powerful, dangerous, and relentless." Alina's eyes narrowed. "Then we make sure he survives long enough to tell the truth. We control the information, not them." The trauma bay settled into tense silence. Connor lay stabilized, the immediate threat neutralized, but the storm outside and within the hospital walls was far from over. Alina knew the enemy would regroup. They would strike again. But for now, Connor was alive, and Alina had proven once more that she could protect him against impossible odds. Outside the trauma bay, the hospital corridors were quiet, the staff watching with awe and relief. They had witnessed courage, skill, and sheer determination, the kind that made ordinary heroes look ordinary. Alina stood over Connor, folder in hand, ready for the next phase of battle. Secrets had been revealed. Danger had been neutralized temporarily, but the war for Connor Hayes' life and the truth he carried was far from over. The trauma bay had quieted to a tense calm, a fragile bubble of relief in the eye of the storm. Connor Hayes lay on the operating table, stabilized but still pale and weak. His chest rose and fell evenly now, oxygen flowing steadily through the lines Alina had adjusted with military precision. Outside, the hospital was quiet, though Alina's instincts screamed that danger was never truly gone. Lydia Hayes stood near the door, still clutching the folder of sensitive intel. Her face was pale, but there was a sense of cautious hope in her eyes. "He's alive," she whispered. "Thanks to you, we have time." Alina didn't reply immediately. Her eyes were scanning every corner of the trauma bay, every doorway, every shadow. The gray-jacketed attacker had been subdued temporarily, but she knew better than to assume he or his allies were finished. Connor stirred slightly, his eyes fluttering open. Recognition and relief washed over his face when they landed on Alina. "You didn't leave me," he whispered, voice weak but filled with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere. Alina said softly, brushing damp strands of hair from his forehead. You survive, that's what matters. Marlowe, who had witnessed the chaos and Alina's precise, fearless interventions, shook his head in disbelief. I've seen trauma before, he admitted quietly, but nothing like this. She's extraordinary. Alina didn't respond. Her focus remained on Connor, ensuring every monitor was stable, every IV line functional, every breathing tube adjusted perfectly. Outside the bay, the hospital's security team secured the remaining hallways, keeping watch for any additional threats. The gray-jacketed man had been restrained, handcuffed, and moved to a secure holding area, but Alina knew the operation behind him ran deeper than a single individual. Whoever had sent him wouldn't stop until Connor and the intel were in their hands. Lydia stepped closer to Alina, lowering her voice. The folder, it contains everything. Military extraction orders, covert mission reports, evidence of illegal operations. They don't want Connor to survive because he's a witness. Alina's jaw tightened. Then we make sure he does. No one touches him. No one takes that information. We control it or they win. Connor's eyes flickered with understanding. Though weak, he managed a faint smile. Alina, I owe you my life. You owe me nothing, she replied, voice steady but soft. Just live, that's the debt you pay. As Connor's condition stabilized further, Alina allowed herself a brief glance at the folder. The intelligence within was explosive. It could expose corruption at the highest levels, reveal covert operations gone wrong, and implicate powerful individuals willing to kill to keep it hidden. She glanced at Lydia. We need a secure location. Now, he can't stay here. The enemy knows where he is and they won't stop. We move before they regroup. Lydia nodded. There's a safe house, government secured, off the grid. I can get us there. Alina's hands adjusted Connor's oxygen mask one last time before helping him sit up. His movements were slow, painstaking, but each one was a victory. He was alive. He was awake. He had survived the impossible. The hospital corridors were eerily silent as they prepared to move Connor. Every shadow seemed to hold a potential threat, every corner a possible attack. Alina led the way, hand on Connor's shoulder, eyes scanning the environment like a predator assessing its territory. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the hallway behind them. The gray-jacketed man's allies had arrived, an entire team, tactical and precise, intent on retrieving the intel and eliminating Connor. Alina's eyes narrowed. Move, she ordered. Her voice was calm, commanding, lethal in its authority. We protect him, no hesitation, go. The team surged forward, shields and weapons raised, but Alina was already moving, intercepting and redirecting threats with precision. She used every ounce of her combat training and battlefield experience to block attacks, neutralize intruders, and create a safe path for Connor and Lydia. Shots rang out in the empty corridor, but no one was hit. Alina's tactics were flawless, moving like a shadow through chaos, every step calculated, every motion decisive. She guided Connor and Lydia through service corridors, stairwells, and emergency exits, evading the enemy with relentless focus. Finally, they reached the rooftop again. The Black Hawk hovered overhead, ready for extraction. Alina helped Connor onto the stretcher and signaled the crew. As the helicopter descended, rotor wash tearing through the rooftop debris, she took one last glance at the hospital, temporary calm restored, but the battle far from over. As they lifted into the air, Alina allowed herself a moment to breathe. Connor was alive, the intel was secure, and the immediate threat had been neutralized. But she knew the enemy would not stop. This was only the beginning of a larger conflict. Connor, still weak, looked up at Alina. You saved me twice now, he said, voice filled with gratitude and disbelief. Alina smiled faintly, brushing hair from his forehead. Just focus on surviving. That's enough. In the helicopter, Lydia opened the folder once more, ensuring the documents were intact. They won't give up, she said quietly. These people, they're powerful. They'll come after Connor again. Alina's eyes narrowed, scanning the horizon as the city lights blurred below. Let them try. I've kept him alive this long. I'll do it again if I have to. No one touches him. No one gets this intel, not while I'm here. Connor's face softened, relief washing over him despite his exhaustion. I don't know how to thank you, he murmured. You don't need to, Alina said. Just live, that's all I want. And maybe stay out of impossible situations for a while, yeah. Connor chuckled weakly, a sound full of gratitude and hope. I'll try. The Black Hawk ascended into the night sky, carrying them away from the chaos of the hospital. Below, the city stretched endlessly, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded in its heart. Above, the helicopter hummed steadily, a symbol of survival, resilience, and the thin line between life and death. Alina sat beside Connor, her gaze firm and unwavering. The truth is out now, she said softly, and we'll make sure it stays safe. They tried to silence him, tried to stop the truth, but they won't succeed. Lydia nodded, relief and exhaustion etched on her face. Thanks to you, Alina. You saved more than his life. You saved the truth. Alina's eyes scanned the horizon once more, always alert, always ready. The battle isn't over, she said, but tonight we won. Connor reached for her hand, weak but sincere. Thank you for everything. Alina smiled faintly, a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. Just survive, Connor, that's all I ask. The rest we handle together. As the helicopter disappeared into the night, the city lights flickering below like stars, the three of them looked toward the uncertain future, alive, vigilant, and unbroken. Connor had survived the impossible, the secrets were secure, and Alina had proven once again that courage, skill, and unyielding resolve could triumph against overwhelming odds. For the enemy, a warning lingered in the night air. Try again, and the storm would be waiting.